Welcome back to another DPS analytic video. This is going to be the 4th week of Naxxramas for Season of Discovery. Looking at all percentiles first, we will see that the Warlock is now back in that top place position, and everything else is starting to inch up closer and closer in terms of that median DPS. Only class that's still underperforming, which I was expecting them to move up, is going to be the Frost Mage. Moving on to max percentile, we will still have the Fire Mage, a good bit ahead of everything else, but you can start to see that everything is inching up closer and closer. Balanced Druid, Feral Druid, Ret Pally, and then the Fury Warrior are sitting in those top 5 positions. Moving on to the 95th percentile, we will see that the Melee Hunter is taking the top place spot this week. Followed by that is the Feral Druid, Destruction Lock, Balanced Druid, and then the Fire Mage. It's pretty crazy to see how far the Warrior goes down when looking at max percentile versus 95th, and the same thing goes for the Ret Pally. And then going through each boss fight specifically and picking out the top performers. And I was recommended this in the comments a couple times now, but you guys said, hey, check max percentile, but also look at 95th percentile because it's a little bit more accurate on what you're really going to see. So for the most part, not too big of a difference on patchwork, which makes sense. You're not having a lot of movement. Everyone's able to do the rotation and try to just maximize their DPS. Only thing that's really standing above here is going to be the Fire Mage, Balanced Druid, and then the Melee Hunter. And then looking at max percentile, we have the Fire Mage, Melee Hunter, and then the Frost Mage. Moving on to Grobulus, we have the Ret Pally, Fire Mage, and then the Balanced Druid. For Gluth, we have Ret Pally, Fury Warrior, and then the Feral Druid. Going on to Thaddeus, still the Fire Mage because of that damage modifier, which makes a lot of sense. Looking at 95th percentile, still going to see the same sort of thing here. Moving on to Noth, Fire and Frost topping the meters here, followed by the Fury Warrior. 95th percentile, kind of sort of the same thing, but the Fury Warrior just drops down so many positions. Going to Hygen, both Druid specs doing incredibly well here, but looking at max percentile, you'll see it's sort of the same thing. It's like max percentile, you're going to have your Fury Warrior, Ret Pally, Fire Mage, and then some of the Hunter specs, and then 95th percentile, anything goes here. For Lotheb, Marksman Hunter, Destro Lock, Balanced Druid, Survival Hunter, and then the Fire Mage, and then looking at max percentile, kind of sort of the same thing, except the Ellie Shaman is now in that top place spot. Going to a Nubricon, Fire Mage, Balanced Druid, and then the Melee Hunter, and then looking at max percentile, Ellie Shaman, Fire Mage, and then the Fury Warrior. Looking at Fairlina, we have the Fire Mage again, still at that top place spot, Ret, Destro, and then Fury Warrior following that, and then looking at 95th for Fairlina, Fire Mage still quite far ahead, and then the Destro Lock not too far behind that, so maybe we'll see that change in the weeks to come. Moving on to Maexna, Destro, Feral, and Fire Mage taking those top 3 spots, and then again, Ret Pally just always trailing behind. Looking at max percentile, Fire Mage once again well ahead on this max percentile, and then following that, sort of the same classes like before. Moving on to Instructor Resuvius, we have the Fire Mage well ahead once again, Fury Warrior, Balanced Druid, and Feral Druid all pretty close to each other, as well as the Frost Mage. Looking at the 95th percentile, your Hunter specs, your Rogues, and the Feral Druid start to take over. Moving on to 4 Horsemen, we have Balanced Druid, both Warlock specs, really good at multi-target fights like 4 Horsemen. And then looking at 95th percentile, Affliction, Destro, and then Balance. So same classes, just the rankings moved around a little bit. Moving on to Sapphiron, we have both Warlock specs and then the Balanced Druid. And then looking at max percentile, Balanced Druid, Affliction Lock, and then the Fire Mage once again. Not too surprised to see that. And then Kel'Thuzad, looking at max percentile, Marksman Hunter, Balanced Druid, and then the Ret Pally, followed by the Affliction Lock and Feral Druid, and then the Ellie Shaman getting pretty close to that top 5 DPS. Looking at 95th percentile, Ellie Shaman, top 3, Melee Hunter, and then the Destro Lock. And then since I've been requested this multiple weeks in a row and I just keep forgetting, we're going to look at the tanks and see what they're doing in terms of DPS. Rogue, Pally, and then the Shaman, followed by the Prot Warrior, Bear Druid, and then the Warlock tank. Moving on to the 99th percentile, we'll see that the Shaman and the Warrior have kind of traded positions almost. Warlock moved up a little bit as well, but yeah, the Rogue is just doing incredible DPS this phase as a tank. Probably the highest DPS when it comes to an off tank. Say for example, a Nubricon where you have to have a tank pick up the 2 adds, having a Rogue do this and then do DPS afterwards where they're not going to be able to switch specs. They're probably one of the best classes to do that this phase. So that makes a lot of sense on why they're so high up here. And if we look at max percentile, I would assume it's going to be the same thing. This time the Pally and the Warrior have now swapped spots, but the Rogue is still in that top place spot, and it makes a lot of sense why. To wrap up this section and to close out the video, I would assume that we'll see the Pally move up a little bit in the weeks to come, as well as the Feral Druid, but other than that, I don't see the Rogue really losing that top place spot. Maybe I'm wrong, we'll have to wait and see. And that's about it for this week. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos just like this one. Comment down below what you'd like to see next, and as always, I will see you in the next video.